Good, good morning, everyone. I'm Gauri Singhal from the Columbia Business School MBA class of 2022. I'm delighted to introduce our next panel, themed Leaders and Founders. I would like to introduce the fantastic panelists on board for this panel. Firstly, we welcome you, Anisha. Anisha Singh is the founding partner of She Capital, an early stage fund that invests in high growth women led businesses. She's the founder and former CEO of mydala.com, which is one of the largest local services marketing platform in India and UAE. Anisha was ranked among the top 7 women CEOs located outside the US by Crunchbase in 2018. Prior to MyDala, Anisha founded and ran a digital technology content company called Kindness Software Solutions. Anisha started her career working with the Clinton administration on an initiative called Springboard, which helped women entrepreneurs raise funds. Anisha has been recognized as one of the top 100 global diversity leaders in 2019 and under the business category in Women in Asia, 50 most influential 2018. Anisha is the president of the jury of the Cartier Women Initiative Awards for the Asia-Oceania region. She was also a judge on a startup reality show on MTV, similar to Shark Tank, called Dropout Private Limited. Anisha has an MA and MBA from America University in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us, Anisha.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
I'd like to next invite Meena Ganesh. Meena is one of India's foremost business leaders and successful entrepreneurs with 3 decades of experience in industries including healthcare, consulting, technology, outsourcing, education, and e-commerce. She is CEO of Portea Medical, India's largest and fastest growing home healthcare company, which she co-founded in 2013. With 1,700 plus employees and operations across 20 plus cities, Portea brings in-home to patients the full range of geriatric, chronic, post-operative care, as well as allied healthcare services. Meena is leading the charge as the company expands to 50 cities over the next 2 years, providing affordable and convenient healthcare solutions. She is also co-promoter of nearly a dozen new age internet technology-enabled startups. A few of them that are leaders in their category include BigBasket.com, India's premier e-grocery retailer, and Bluestone.com, India's leading online jeweler. In addition, she is a non-executive director on the board of a few private limited companies in the financial services sector. Prior to her stint with Pearson, Meena set up the Tesco Hindustan Service Center, Tesco's outsourced IT services and analytics operation in India, and served as the CEO. She was also the only Indian and amongst only 4 women in the Global Retail Council of Tesco, an elite group of about 50 people who ran the operations of Tesco worldwide. Meena is a PGDM holder from IIM Calcutta and has a graduate degree in physics from the Madras University. In 2011, she was conferred the Distinguished Alumnus Award by IIM Calcutta. She was also one of the 5 finalists for the Forbes Leadership Award in 2012. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. I extend a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Next, we have Anubha Prasad. Anubha is the founder CEO of KareKeBa Ventures, KareKeBa, which translates to We Must in Bhojpuri, an incubation impact investment platform for homegrown startups and innovation-driven businesses in underserved geographies of India, what we love to call Bharat. Founded in October 2020, KareKeBa is curating high-potential startups from Bharat and mentoring them for scaling up and building their investment readiness, which is followed up by securing investments for them. Anubha worked as the National Coordinator India at the United Nations Environment Programme, leading projects that strive to put inclusion, innovation, equity, and sustainability at the heart of economic policy making. She worked for integrated policy making as well as project implementation for inclusive green development, sustainable finance, innovation-driven enterprises, and sustainable livelihoods. An NTA scholar, electrical engineer, MBA, and a certified associate of the Indian Institute of Bankers, Anubha has 23 years of experience at Small Industries Development Bank of India, SIDBI. She held key positions: general manager heading several field offices, team leader at SIDBI's Sustainable Finance and International Cooperation Vertical and its central loan processing cell, working on MSME financing and development risk analysis, impact investing, sustainable finance, circular economy, and gender mainstreaming, and mentoring hundreds of first-generation entrepreneurs at the bottom of the pyramid. She successfully managed the World Bank projects on resource efficiency, Green Climate Fund, EU Switch Asia projects, GIZ's responsible finance projects, etc. She was associated with Poorest States Inclusive Growth Program for financial inclusion of women at the bottom of the pyramid. A thought leader, Anubha has held board-level positions in several government and private companies and is presently on the advisory board of World Resource Institute. Anubha is a visiting faculty and jury of business incubators at several B schools. She was the team leader of SIDBI's Officers Voluntary Initiative of mentoring first-generation women entrepreneurs, a work which was lauded by Niti Aayog and Government of India. With her vast exposure in startup financing, SME credit delivery, microfinance, financial inclusion, gender equity, and impact investing, Anubha hopes to make Bharat an equal partner in India's growth story. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. We extend a warm welcome to you.
Thanks, Gauri, for this wonderful introduction.
I am very happy and excited to have all the panelists. I'd like to now introduce Professor Gita Johar, who's kindly agreed to be the moderator for today's panel. Professor Gita Johar is the Vice Dean for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Columbia Business School. Professor Johar holds a Bachelor's of Commerce from Bombay University and an MBA from IIM Calcutta and a PhD from New York University in 1993. Gita Johar has been the faculty of Columbia Business School since 1992 and is currently the Mayer Feldwerk Professor of Business. She served as the school's Faculty Director of Online Initiatives, Senior Vice Dean, as the inaugural Vice Dean for Research, as Director of the Columbia Business School Behavioral Lab, and on Columbia University's Institutional Review Board. Professor Johar is also the Faculty Director of the Design Your Innovation Blueprint Executive Education Program, Chair of the Faculty Steering Committee for the Columbia Global Center, South Asia and Mumbai, and the co-editor of the premier academic journal on consumer behavior, the Journal of Consumer Research, from 2014 to 2017. Professor Johar's expertise lies in consumer psychology, focusing on how consumers react to marketing efforts, especially advertising, promotions, and sponsorship. She also examines the influence of consumer self-control and perceptions of control on decision-making and consumption. This research has implications for the design of effective communication strategies. She has published several influential articles in the areas of consumer persuasion and decision-making in leading marketing and psychology journals. Professor Johar has also published cases on consumer adoptions of new products and on marketing and advertising planning, and teaches the core marketing course as well as courses on advertising and branding, global immersion India, global immersion Myanmar, research methods, and consumer behavior to MBA, executive MBA, and PhD students. Thank you so much, Professor Johar. I hand it over to you to take the panel forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gauri. Thank you to the organizers for putting together this really amazing panel. As you saw from the introductions alone could take on that entire hour that we have allotted to us. So we really have an amazing set of speakers, and I'm very happy to be in conversation with all of you. And I want to start by thinking about the title of this panel, which is really Leaders and Founders. And so I want to think about what made you or what inspired you to become a founder. And when you answer, you can talk about anything that inspired you, where you got your idea from, and just anything about your journey to becoming a founder. And I want to turn to Anubha first, because she is the most recent entrant to becoming a founder. She started her venture in October 2020. After holding, as you heard, many leadership positions. So Anubha, what made you take the plunge?
So Gita, I've been a banker, project financier, and a credit and risk manager for most of my life. And from the sustainable finance vertical of SIDBI, I could make a smooth transition to UN environment. So I was happily working on SDGs and inclusive green economy, innovations, etc., and for a couple of years. And then the pandemic struck. So bringing many resets. And the most stunning one was a 360-degree shift in our priorities. So March 2020 was the first time when this countrywide lockdown was imposed. And it was, of course, necessitated by the pandemic. And shortly, we were to witness in horror a massive humanitarian crisis unfolding. People, those living on their daily wages, those who had migrated to metros and other affluent pockets for livelihoods. So they started migrating back to their native places through whatever means they could lay their hands on. And some even walked 1,000 miles and with all their life's possessions. So it came as a stark reminder of the skewed developmental model, where the divide between India and what we call Bharat is highly accentuated. So Bharat is what lives in tier 2, tier 3 towns and villages, and where most of the workforce is informal and which migrates for practically everything. And that was the time precisely when I and a couple of my like-minded friends, we thought that it is high time that Bharat should get its due from all of us. So we were talking of the other 500 million. So we can't be vocal for local unless we enable and empower the local businesses trying to solve problems at the grassroots levels. And this country is not going to be made by the government alone. We have to make it you and me. So we started KareKeBa Ventures from Patna in Bihar, the state which ranks lowest on practically all developmental indicators. It ranks 33rd out of 33 on SDG Composite Index. And the name was from Bhojpuri lexicon, KareKeBa, meaning we must do it. It's not Japanese. And Bhojpuri is the lingua franca of the labor class in India. So that was the trigger, in fact. So seeing this stark divide, and we started taking baby steps in curating and nurturing startups and businesses from Bharat, backing the right kind of talents and getting them the power of network and the requisite capital to scale up. So that's the story, that's the inspiration, and that's the journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Anubha. That's amazing. So you were not really planning on doing this, but an external force or a situation.
Happily working with a salaried, UN, posh UN job. But then, yeah, this trigger happened.
Right. Yeah. Patna is far from a posh UN job for sure. Yes. Let me turn to Anisha next. Anisha, you have started, I think, 3 ventures over the last few years after working with the Clinton government. And a lot of this is in the financial space, but you've also done digital companies, content companies, you've done service provider, you've created companies in India, but also in the UAE. So I want to ask you, was this something you always planned to do, or what was your journey to starting all these different ventures?
Yeah, God, I'm so sorry. There's some phone ringing and I don't know how to turn it off. All right. So, I actually never planned on anything. I actually saw my dad go through a lot of hardships. He was setting up his business when I was a kid. And at that point, I was like, I'll do anything except become an entrepreneur, because it just seemed like such a tough journey. And if you met me in undergrad, I'm sure, and I think I was voted to be, like the least ambitious of all my friends. So there was no agenda and plan like other friends had. I would become this or I'd become that. It just so happened, and I don't even know what was the trigger. I do know that I met somebody while I was at Clinton administration. I met this woman called Julie Holdren, who I just connected back with. And she used to run a company in DC called Olympus Group. I thought she walked on water. She had kids, she could do 30 push-ups. She ran this big SaaS company. I was just like, this is amazing. Who is this person? I want to be her. So in the back of my head, I always knew I wanted to do that. I don't, it just so ended up happening that I wanted to be back in India. I quit my job in Boston. I had enough savings, moved back here, started my first company. I was also very delusional. I thought, companies start coming, we'll sell it. It'll sell in 1 year, I'll be done. 1 year later, I was sitting and crying on a couch because I couldn't pay salaries. So all that, that shit happens and everything worked. That journey becomes so addictive. I always say entrepreneurship is like a drug. You just stay on it and keep getting on it and on it. And it's been so long now, and every bit of it is so exciting. I love it. I've loved every minute. And now I can finally do 30 push-ups straight, just like Julie. So I'm like, I'm set. So hard venture, but I can do them now.
That's a great story, Anisha. I like your analogy to a drug. So it does sound like there are people, serial entrepreneurs, who just can't see themselves doing anything else. And this is how you see your purpose and your meaning in life, is to start these new ventures.
Yeah, I mean, and I think at some point, but you also start thinking, and I think Anubha has done this, Meena's doing this, you also start looking at ventures and saying they've got to have more meaning than just, well, my Dala does local marketing, but at the end of the day, we sell coupons. And She Capital came about because I felt like we needed to give back to the entrepreneurial community. There were such great women founders that were not getting enough funding. And I think each one of the founders on the panel is doing something that's making a difference. At some point in your life, you're like, well, what am I doing to change things? And what's the impact I'm going to leave? And how am I going to leave it? So your brain really starts thinking that way at some point, you know?
Yeah, thanks, Anisha. And that's definitely a common thread. And I want to turn to Meena, whose business is also about literally saving and helping lives. So as you all heard, Meena is the founder of Portea, which is a healthcare company that is the largest home healthcare company. And prior to that, Meena has done many different things in many different sectors. So I'll turn to you, Meena, and ask what made you enter this really complicated, difficult healthcare sector after all your prior successes, and what's been your journey?
So I became an entrepreneur in the year 2000 after having worked for nearly 15 years in corporate across multiple different companies. And when I started Customer Asset in 2000, I was working with Microsoft, and it was very exciting to see. And as part of my role in Microsoft, when I was heading the unit of that worked with all the technology startups, and getting them to adopt Microsoft technologies, that's when I realized that this looks very exciting. Why should I not be doing a startup? And that's when my journey of startups began. So for the last 21 years, I've been in that journey. And like you said, looked at various sectors, started from BPO to education to, and then thereafter in 2011, we started Growth Story. And through that, we founded nearly more than a dozen companies across variety of different consumer facing problems, and also now SaaS problems, which work with businesses. In 2013, I exited from Tutor Vista completely after having sold the company to Pearson. And I was thinking whether I want to remain an entrepreneur and build something again, or we had a portfolio of companies. Should I spend more time supporting them and helping them grow? I felt that there were still some problems which I would prefer to solve on my own rather than work through other entrepreneurs. All the other companies are also our companies. We promote them. We get entrepreneurs to work alongside us, do some seed funding, then raise funds from institutional investors. But I still wanted to do something completely on my own with a lot of executive responsibility. Felt that healthcare in India especially needed a lot of disruption. I'm sure that's the case across the world. And what I felt and this was of course a lot of my own personal experience of dealing with healthcare needs of elderly parents, that hospital care is great in India. We've got really good quality hospitals, and if you are in an urban setting and you can afford it, then you can get the best care that you can in the world. But what happens after or in between or instead of hospital care? There is nothing which provides you with that confidence that you can get good quality, continuous care all your life, because only 30% of healthcare needs of people require any hospitalization or even an institutional setup. But that whole piece that we need to do for 70% of the time does not exist in India, did not exist in India till we came in and started to build a whole new element in the whole healthcare system in India. So that was a journey. That's what we started. And from day one, by the way, the intro is a little dated. We have about 4,000 people across the country. And every month we do about 150,000 home visits across about 30 locations in the country. So when we started that, from day one, I knew that this was going to be something which needs scale, which means it needs technology to be invested in. It is a medical service. You need real core competence in medicine, which obviously I don't have. Then another interesting theme is that I know nothing about anything. So whichever area of business that I need to bring in, whether it's a BPO or education or now healthcare, we needed to get the experts also as a part of the founding team, but that's a story for another day. So both technology and medical capability were absolutely core to building out a business in this area, which was going to be all India, which is going to be highly scalable, which would provide great consumer experience, and we should be able to manage the quality of delivery, especially because the entire workforce was going to be remote. So with some of those principles is how we started and built this business over the last nearly 8 years now that we've been working on this.
Thank you, Meena. I'll follow up with you about the, you said you identified a gap in the market and there was no one doing this kind of business, and that's why you entered this. Is there also any personal part to the story about why you entered the healthcare, home healthcare business?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, prior to that, I had taken care of my parents' health, and in fact, my father passed away in 2010. So I had seen very closely the kind of challenges that all of us face managing the health of an elderly parent who needs a lot of care beyond hospitalization. And that was just, it was ridiculous. I mean, the kind of conversations that I used to have with nurses or whoever had to come would be, you know, it was unreal that this is, how poor can this be? You can't get anybody. You can't trust them when they come. You don't know whether they are qualified, whether they are capable of doing what they claim they're doing. Are they bringing the good drugs, spurious drugs, consumables? What's happening? One has no idea. So it was quite an eye opener that this piece is really broken.
Yeah. Thanks, Meena. And I should say at this point that Meena and I both got our MBAs from IIM Calcutta in 1985. So we go back a very long way and have taken very different paths. As you can imagine, an academic is maybe the opposite end of the spectrum of being an entrepreneur. It's definitely not a risk-taking profession. And also I'm also a customer of Meena's company, because I think one of your target customers is children or people who live abroad and have aging parents in India. And so I have help from Portea, and I'm a very happy customer. I should put that in, a plug for Portea Healthcare.
Thank you.
So let me take a question from the audience that I'm reading now, which is actually something I did want to ask all of you, which asks, what is the toughest thing that new entrepreneurs fail to understand or account for? And maybe I can start with you, Anisha.
You know, I mean, there are a lot of things, right? I'll just tell you for my own journey, but also now because I talk to so many founders and what I think building the right team right at the beginning. First, I think it's finding the right co-founder, and then building the right core team is if you get that formula right, you're broadly set. So I will tell you this, I think we had a problem in the middle, which I think COVID has largely rectified. I think at one point it was trendy to start a startup. So it became Pele, Shah Rukh Khan and Salman Khan people used to follow. And then after that, everybody was following Vijay and Sachin and all these guys, right? And everybody wanted to be them. And so I had a lot of people come to me and say, I'm going to do a startup, but there was no problem. Like Meena's solving a problem, Anubha's solving a problem. There was no problem that was being solved. It was a startup for the sake of a startup, and the business model was raising funding. I think that's a big problem right there. You better be solving a problem, or you better be adding some serious value. So I think that, and then if you can get the core team right and just work at it, I mean, that's pretty sorted. And of course, not be over enthusiastic like I was. I think actually I've seen a vast difference. I started Maidala in 2009. That was my first internet play. Since then, I think founders are just, we were stupid, you know, when we started. Founders are so mature now. They know exactly what they want and the kind of term sheets and this and that. And these, I mean, when we started, we were, I think, the kids, new kids on the block. We had no idea. So I really feel like the founders are awesome now, especially in India. We're seeing just an amazing breed of founders come through. They're very mature about where they're headed, and they do realize now that they've got to solve a problem.
Thank you, Anisha. I think you made 2 points that are really important. One is about finding that need. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And being a marketing professor myself, that's something I really think is critical, and that is a key question. You also talked about talent and finding the right people around you. So I want to turn to Meena now, who, with all of your experience and can you share with us, like, what keeps you personally up at night? What are the challenges that you face as an entrepreneur?
There are 2 things. First, I want to answer the earlier question that you asked. For me, one of the things that all entrepreneurs need to remember that whatever you have, whatever plans that you put in place, you assume that you'll take a certain amount of time, you need a certain amount of money, and X amount of effort that you have to put in to get to the place that you want to. Multiply it by 3. You'll need 3 times everything. Okay, it's going to take much longer, lots more of money, lots more of sweat and blood before you get to a reasonable place. So anyway, that's one point I just wanted to make for record. In terms of what I think is important at any point in time for any new startup is that is there somebody who wants your product? Are they willing to pay for it? Will they cry if you shut down? I think that to me is the most important thing. Getting that product market fit so strongly and making sure that there is, and for me, the acid test is, if tomorrow I shut down Portea, will people cry? I think the answer to that is yes. Because this is a service which is so important and people are willing to pay, provided, of course, we do the right quality of service and the delivery is as per expectation. But that fitment for me is the biggest and most important thing. Now, having done that, if you're thinking of building something which is going to be big, which is going to be impactful, then you need to make the investments right up front, be it in terms of the team, the amount of investments that you bring in. You have to make a you have to take a bold step if you want to build that kind of a large business. So that becomes a very important thing.
And Meena, if I can just follow up. So to you personally, have you always got those parameters right? Or are there things that you wish you had done differently?
Oh, absolutely. Every day, even today, I think I could have, what I did yesterday, I could have done better. So there is no such thing as a perfect, a perfect startup or a perfect journey. And that's the beauty of it. The number of pivots or changes that we need to take, either because we've taken a wrong step or the market has changed or there are opportunities that have come your way. All of these can drive you and should, in fact, keep modifying your journey. And this pandemic was a very, very good example of how we had to literally overnight create a whole new offering because there was a need, there was a problem. We were there positioned to solve it, as well as some of the other businesses that we were doing were hit. So both because there was an issue as well as there was an opportunity, we were able to build something very quickly. So that you need to be constantly thinking about what else can you do? How can you change yourself too? So it could be just a mistake or it could be an environment, but you need to. I'll give you an example from my customer asset days, the first business that we started. It was in the year 2000 and we built a business expecting it to be supporting internet companies. So it was a back-end customer support for internet companies. And that was the time when the first meltdown in the web 1.0 industry happened, 2000. So we started the business and then we realized there was no business. All the clients that we were pitching to were pretty much had pretty much evaporated. So whether we liked it or not, we just had to completely transform ourselves from being a internet support company to a call center company. And that is the most difficult transformation that we had to do. Then again, down the line, there was 9/11, our company nearly shut down. We didn't pay salaries for 3 months. We had no money in the bank. Our investments that were coming in right then got stopped. So then again, you have to do something. So yeah, there are a lot of things that you can do wrong. There are a lot of things that environment can push you to do.
So it can be a pretty rocky road, I think is what I'm hearing. It's not always what it seems like from the outside. It's a huge challenge to be an entrepreneur. Meena, you talked about COVID, and I want to actually keep building on that point. And I want to turn to Anubha specifically to say how has, I mean, for you, clearly the inspiration came from this crisis and the business is built as a result of the crisis, almost, I would say. I want to ask what opportunities, other than obviously your business itself, do you see for India in this moment, given this crisis, and also given the barriers and obstacles for a really entrepreneurial ecosystem to flourish? What are those barriers in your view, and what is the impact of COVID going to be?
Yeah, thanks, Gita. Since KareKeBa was founded in the wake of COVID, so I always say in lighter vein, of course, that we are COVID positive. But more seriously, yeah, there are challenges, COVID or no COVID, for the startup ecosystem in India. Of course, the ecosystem is much more matured as of now than it was maybe 10 years back. Even the impact investment scenario is much more matured. But there are hurdles like, of course, India has improved 23 notches in the ease of doing business index. And however, the roadblocks are, IPR and contract laws are not very strong. Debt as a means of financing does not work because of high interest rates and demands of collateral securities. I've been on that side of table as well. And of course, a constant burden of fixed cash outflows. If you talk of VC funding, then, fundraising is a full-time job in India. So the other day I was speaking with the founder of one of the most successful agri-tech startups in India. And he told me that he had to pitch 62 times before they could secure their first round. So with wafer-thin bandwidths, how do we expect a startup to focus on its operations and scale-up strategy while doing fundraise? However, things have definitely improved. So this year, with over USD 500 million invested in Indian startups in the first week of January itself, this year promises to be a thrilling one for startups. And when I talk of opportunities, seeing the trends, so I would say that the digital divide has largely been bridged between the rural and urban communities. And I say that there are a lot of problems in agriculture which are witnessing a massive curiosity from the best Indian talents using technology at scale. So I hope to shortly see the first agri-tech unicorn, followed by several more during this decade. Of course, I firmly believe that climate startups and solutions, I was listening to the panel before me, and which talked about clean technologies and clean energy. So climate startups and solutions are going to be the mega trend this decade. There'll be very significant capital flows across asset classes into making this world a more sustainable place. India has presented to the world an exemplary model of fighting the pandemic. So let's also present a model of building back better. So I really aspire to see impact unicorns. I aspire to see Bharat as an equal partner of India in the journey of economic growth. Thanks.
Anubha, and I want to build on what you said and ask Anisha, you are focused particularly on women entrepreneurs in your current business. And we talked more generally about some of the barriers in India, particularly to the startup ecosystem. Can you speak about the particular and specific barriers that women entrepreneurs may face and the genesis for your business?
So when I started the fund, I'll tell you this, I got a lot of pushback, even for female entrepreneurs, because everybody said, we don't need this quota, But the fact of the matter is, whether we like to call a spade or not, that's our thing. But there is a difference. There are studies globally that show you that there is not enough funding that goes to women entrepreneurs, even in most gender, equality countries such as Sweden and Norway. when they've done studies, Harvard did studies around this that said VCs, when they meet a female, they would ask her different questions as they'd ask a male entrepreneur on, instead of how would you scale the company, how would you leave your family and be able to do this? Very different questions, okay? I actually think it's the best time to be doing this in India. And it's not like it took me forever to raise the fund also, because I think it was a leap of faith from a lot of people. Is this going to happen? Are there enough female entrepreneurs out there? I actually think the businesses of tomorrow, a lot of them, and a lot in the impact sector, but otherwise also a lot of consumer businesses are being built by women. And I think now there are so many great female founders that we are seeing in the Indian ecosystem that it actually proves the point that, people can juggle responsibilities. There is no such thing that you're starting a family, so you're not going to be able to do the startup that you're doing. And there are enough and more role models coming. And the idea behind She Capital was to actually have more and more of these. I mean, my entrepreneurial journey started because I looked at a phenomenal female founder, right? And I think this whole thing came about because I heard a talk by this guy, and it's a book called Doing Good Better. I've forgotten the name of the author. But basically it said you could do good top down or bottom up. It didn't have to be one approach. And I think if we don't have enough female founders that people can look at, and if it's just a handful of us that stood there, and that the world was never going to change. And so this was, I thought, much needed. We needed more so that we could have more female-led unicorns. You're seeing the wave happen in the US. Last year saw a record number of female-led unicorns giving phenomenal exits to their investors. And I think you're going to start seeing that wave happen here in the next 2 years. And so we want to be on the helm of it and be cheering female founders on. There are different questions that get asked around family, and there is a little bit of a bias, whether we want to admit it or not.
Yeah, Anisha, definitely. In fact, the paper you referenced is written by a colleague of mine, Tori Higgins. It was published in HBR, but it is a Columbia research that actually showed that the questions that are asked to female founders are different from the questions that are asked to male founders. And in fact, there's other research that shows the tone of voice matters, and people respond more favorably to the more deep tones and the male tones of voice when founders are before these VCs and other things. There's a lot of research, to your point, and I think your business is clearly fulfilling a really big need, not just on the part of female entrepreneurs, but in the part of the world, because I think the types of businesses that people start are also inspired by their passions and their backgrounds. So it's important to have diversity in terms of who the entrepreneurs are, and I think you're filling a really
I actually went out to raise funding for Maidala in 2009. I was pregnant actually, 4 months. I didn't know about VC funding that time. And so when we went out to raise that, I didn't realize, but I think this holds true for females, males, everybody. There's a saying that I heard somebody say, and I think it's true. They said, entrepreneurs have to be too dumb to die. And by that, they meant you just have to have your blinders on and not listen to anything. And at that point, I heard so much around the pregnancy, and I actually had VCs take my founders aside and say, are you sure you want her? I was the CEO and the main founder, and they said, we'd fund it, but she has to get off, and go on maternity leave or whatever, take care of kids. So it was most bizarre where it started. So I didn't think I'd end up doing She Capital, or that's where the genesis of it would ever come around, but maybe there was a bit of that there, so.
Meena, do you see any biases or anything else, because you are also a promoter and you've seen a lot of people come with new ideas? What's your view on this?
Well, speaking for myself, we have, as a part of a portfolio, a number of women-led businesses, and they're doing exceedingly well. I have what else can I say? I have a great regard for women entrepreneurs. I can't possibly say anything to the contrary, given that I'm one of them. Just like Anisha, when I started Customer Asset, I had a 6-month-old baby. And it was the most difficult time in my life, because a call center or a BPO company works 24/7, and you have a 6-month-old baby. It's not fun. I mean, I don't know whether I was coming or going or what was going on, but you figure it out and you have to make it work.
At least you were up at all odd hours, Meena, you could. That was so
I know. Yeah. So Given my own experience, I know how hard women work and how committed they can be, and it's not a gender thing, it is the individual. Some individuals are committed, and you need to be able to suss out who are good committed founders. It's not about their gender, and that's true even for the colleagues that I've had. I have in Portea, I've had some of the best women who've gone through pregnancy, produced 2 children while working in Portea, and done a fantastic job, no issues. So, those things are okay. But that said, Anisha is right. There's a lot of pushback that women have been getting, but I also think that there is another angle to it. There are a lot of women who hesitate to become founders because they feel that they are not ready, or they're not comfortable with the roller coaster that you have to go through. Yeah. It is not a 9 to 5. It is not something which is predictable. You can't say that my life is going to be even keel and I have this work time and this home time and everything is going to sit in its place. It doesn't work like that. So a lot of women tend to hesitate, even though they have a good idea or they know that they are good for this. They hesitate in taking the plunge. There is also the social milieu which expects women to be more settled. 20 years back or 30 years back, women were not encouraged to go into careers, but now they are heavily encouraged to, but get into a more settled kind of a role so that your life you can manage while you do whatever else you're doing. You're going after your ambition. And the most unsettling thing is to be an entrepreneur. The other thing that I noticed that women entrepreneurs tend to also sell themselves short. They believe that they need to have a male entrepreneur alongside or a male CEO because to be the front, because they think not just because what is expected from them. They think they don't have the capability to be salesy. They are not good at investors. They're not good with finances. All these are just mental mindsets that you're creating for yourself. There is nothing which says that A or B or C cannot be good at these. You'll figure it out. I mean, if you have to do it, you'll figure it out. Yeah. Right. So that the mindset or the lack of confidence saying that I'm not good for this is another thing that comes in the way of having lots of women entrepreneurs succeeding in this country. And we need to attend to all those also. Some of those can only come by women entrepreneurs being able to see others. You need to see role models of other women entrepreneurs who are perhaps 2 steps ahead of you. They're also small. They've just started. They failed. They raised money. They've gone through Series A. They collapsed after. You need to see different kinds of entrepreneurs, different kinds of role models who are people like you. And that's when it becomes easier for women to also believe that this is something they can do.
So to add to what Meena and Anisha said, I would say that even the families play a very important role. It may not be there for you and for me, but for many of the women entrepreneurs, the families play a very important role by being supportive or, due to the lack of support that they can offer.
Thank you. And I think Anisha talked about her personal role model, and I see all 3 of you as role models for all of our students watching today. And I want to ask a question, final question before I turn to taking the audience questions, which is about what advice would you give to our students? They are getting their MBA right now. A lot of them are very interested in becoming entrepreneurs, but perhaps they want to transition into that role like a lot of you did, rather than starting straight off the bat after the MBA. So what advice would you give to our students who have this entrepreneurial mindset and are thinking about, well, should I go into it now? Should I go into a corporate job and then transition? So just broadly, what would be your advice to them? And maybe I'll start with Anisha.
I don't have the right answer. There's no right time to be an entrepreneur. There's a right, business model that you see, or the right people that you join up with. And I think that's the time. There's no such thing. And of course, your circumstances have to allow you. But I keep saying this, if you're Indian broadly, you're much more fortunate than other globe, across the globe, because no matter what happens, there will be a roof over your head. Your parents will take you in. So what's the worst that can happen? I mean, You know, if you've got a great idea, don't wait for it, because somebody else is going to come around, execute, and take it forward. You know, time waits for no one in the entrepreneurial world, definitely. So I think if you've got that, go for it. There's no such thing as I've got to go get corporate experience. The startup world teaches you so fast. You grow from, you know, I wish I had started what I started much earlier. So there's no such thing. And it ages you very fast as well. But I think it makes you just grow really fast. So the corporate experience or not, you just have to be ready to get down and dirty and realize that it's going to take you that struggle. And it's, you know, just it's going to take you a little bit of time to get there.
Great. Meena, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, do you have a burning desire to build something? Entrepreneurship is not a fad. It's not a fashion. It's not something that you try on and say, okay, you know, does it work for me? You really need to want to do something. You want to build something. You see a problem, you want to solve it, and you think you're the best person to solve it, and you have to be slightly nuts. You have to be slightly crazy, because you believe that you can do something and you can do it better than anybody else. And you're willing to put your entire life behind it. So unless in my view, unless you have that burning desire, you shouldn't do it. But if there is a burning desire, then doesn't matter, you know, how many years of experience you've had or not had. You don't know something, you will learn it. You'll find somebody along with you who will be a part of your journey, who brings in that talent or that skill. But you will figure it out. But the important thing is that passion and the desire to build something new, that has to be there. That has to drive you.
Anubha?
I always tell the entrepreneurs whom I mentor that never fall in love with the solution that you've built for a problem. So fall in love with the problem that you started to solve in the first place. And of course, don't ever think of raising funds, Series A, Series B, Series C as you know, an end in itself. It's just a means to certain end. So it is a means to, you know, scale up your solution to the problem, which has to be a very viable problem with a large accessible market.
Great, very wise words of advice there. I want to take some of the questions from the audience and pose it to you. And a lot of questions for Meena about the healthcare space. And one of the questions is, do you think telemedicine will be the next big thing in India? And how does the dearth of doctors in India play into building out its healthcare infrastructure?
So what COVID did was, right at the start, it forced two things. One, it made the government change some regulations. Literally overnight, telemedicine regulations were introduced, which was in the month of March, I think, towards late March. Telemedicine was made legal. It still wasn't before that. And e-pharmacy was also made legal, which it wasn't before that. So the government realized that there was no choice but to allow people to access teleconsultation or support in modes other than face-to-face. And during the course of these 10 months, I think people have also realized that yes, there is an alternative to go visiting doctor in a clinic. So even patients and even elderly patients are willing to look at this alternative of teleconsultation or digital modes of accessing health. That said, I think by itself, it doesn't solve the entire problem, because telemedicine, along with all the other things that you need, which is sometimes a physical consult, a lab, you know, a lot of other solutions that you need, when everything comes together, then it becomes meaningful. So I do see teleconsultations growing, and they have grown. They'll probably continue to grow. The government has done a lot of work around creating a digital health infrastructure. They have created a whole new set of building blocks, which are going to be mandatory for anybody who wants to play in this space. So all these are good directions. It's a space worth watching. It will grow, but I don't think it's going to suddenly transform and everything is going to move tele. I doubt if that's the way things will move. Yeah.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question, more broad to you, Meena, is how do you think India has dealt with the COVID health crisis?
Well, it's interesting that today people look at the statistics in India, and yesterday we were talking about it, Gita. What is it that India has done well? Why is it that the number of cases in India are so low? And I'm touching wood as I speak. I hope that we have indeed cracked it, and it's going to remain this way. Um, some of the things that went well for India is right from the start. There was um, uh, there was a willingness to look at alternative solutions. We realized that, of course, there was a lockdown, all of that. I'm not getting into that. Just from a medical perspective, the entire country, all of us came together. All the senior leaders in the healthcare sector and some of the leaders, some of the policy makers, all of us got together literally on WhatsApp groups that got created, and we were constantly looking at what can we do differently, how do we crack it, how do we come together. I think that was something which was amazing, especially when you see that this is a space where there's a least amount of trust between healthcare providers. Each one worries that the other is trying to take away their pie. But this was something which brought everybody together, and it's not stopped there. I see that working together to create new solutions for COVID crisis, and then now for as such for vaccination and healthcare industry, I see a different energy that it has created. So that was something which was very exciting. And as a result of that, of course, there was a lot of good innovation around moving from facility-based care to quickly moving to home-based remote monitoring, creating new technology platforms, creating new ventilator solutions. All kinds of things came in place so that we could manage it. Of course, now the vaccine is available in India, and we are trying very hard to increase the pace at which the vaccinations happen. That said, I think this has also given us some ideas of what needs to change in future in the healthcare sector in this country. Earlier, the main focus was around somebody falls sick, let's get them a solution. But this is not about sickness. This is about ensuring people are well. This is about being able to manage crises of this nature. This is about tracking people's health over long periods of time, especially if somebody has a chronic disease or if they have an infectious disease. How do you manage that in the most efficient way so that they don't get sick enough to land up in a hospital? So there are all these new pieces that the healthcare system needs to develop, and I see a lot of focus going in there, which is good.
Thank you. I think we are almost out of time, but I'll just give a minute to Anubha and Anisha if you have any closing words. Anubha?
I've been going first, so Anubha can go first.
Anisha, you can go.
All right. No, I mean, this is about entrepreneurship. So I think if you're thinking about doing it, don't overthink it. There is no other time. This is the time. And I think COVID's taught us that more than anything else. Have an innovative business model and then just go after actually everybody should do whatever makes them happy. That's the goal. Don't do the trendy stuff. Don't become an entrepreneur just because it's the trend and you want to do it. We are now seeing so many other people joining great startups and doing phenomenal stuff as not the founders, but the founding team. So just do whatever makes you happy, really, honestly. Life's too short.
I would say that there was never a better time to be an entrepreneur in India. Also for women, goes also for women. And the ecosystem support is there. However, you need to have your priorities right while you are pursuing this journey, because there's not a simple option. There's a difficult option, and you need to be ready for the challenges and just follow your heart, follow your passion. That's it.
Thank you all so much. And on those great words of advice, do what makes you happy, follow your passion, work hard. All of these are great pieces of advice for anybody at any stage in their life. I want to thank you all very much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your stories with us. And I'll turn it over back to the organizers.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gita.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, Anisha, Anubha, and Meena for joining us. It's been a fantastic panel, and it's been a great learning experience for all of us. Thank you again for taking our time on a Saturday evening, and I hand it over back to Nishant. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.